Hey, welcome back. What we're going to do today is we're going to walk through a press progression for all the different vertical presses that you'll do in our training program. So the reason I like to do vertical presses is because it's a great expression that it really translates to sport, because whenever you're doing a bench press or something like that lying on your back, you kind of pinch or pin down your scapula so you don't get as much free scapula movement. So an overhead press does translate to sport a bit better, while also it translates pretty well to horizontal presses at the same time. So the strength you build from a vertical press translates better to a horizontal press than the other way around of just doing a lot of horizontal pressing, and it's not going to really improve your overhead press. But it's really functional, it gets the entire body involved. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a press progression, working through the strict shoulder press to the push press to the push jerk. And once you know these, then you're able to apply it into other movements as well, getting into more of the split jerk or getting into more of the single arm variations and everything. And we'll dive in a little bit to why you would choose those and what purpose you would put those into a program. But to teach the strict press first, you always have to go in this order. You go from strict shoulder press into a push press into a push jerk. The increase in complexity and the increase in the number of steps of that movement while you are teaching through the progression. If you can't do something that's further on the progression, you go backwards to the most basic thing. So you start this, you coach this by starting with a stick. You don't load it on the barbell until you can prove that you can do it with something that is almost weightless. Okay? So what we're going to start with is just this PVC pipe. You can use a stick or broomstick or anything like that. So what you're going to do is you're going to have a strict press. So let's work on the grip first. So you want a grip that is about slightly wider than shoulder width. Okay, just outside of shoulder width gives you room to get your arms into that front rack position. Okay, so if I'm going straight here, I want to go slightly outside of shoulder width. If you're lining it up on your hips, you're probably going to be just outside the hips, or you can go a thumb width away from the hips, and you're going to get a pretty decent width on your hands. Okay, so for a strict press, what you're going to do is you're going to want a full grip on that bar. Thumb is wrapped around. We don't do any false grips, it's kind of risky, but we're going to do a full grip on the bar. So when you're lining up here, you want the elbows to be directly under that bar. So if they're behind, it's going to be really hard to press it. And you're going to, if you want them to be directly underneath, and you want to have a tight grip, a strong grip on that bar. The reason is if you have a loose grip, your wrist is going to get into extension. That's going to put more pressure on your wrist, which doesn't make your wrist feel good. So we're going to keep a tight grip so that bar ends up stacked over a vertical forearm. Okay, this is a setup for a strict as far as the upper body here, but you have to establish your base. Your feet are directly underneath your hips, and your glutes are squeezed and your core is engaged, so you stay vertical here. Okay, we want a nice vertical torso so that we can have a nice vertical bar path. When you're looking at this from top to bottom, ultimately you want that bar to go over the midline of the body. If you're tracing a line from the center of the arch of the foot all the way to the barbell, you want that to be moving in a straight line at all times. So as we initiate this, I have a really nice grip here, and I have my glutes squeezed, my core is engaged. Now to initiate this movement, I'm not going to press first, I'm going to pull the chin back first. If I pull the chin back, then I'm able to keep that bar over my midline. Everything is solid down below. Now I'm going to press it up, and it goes really close to my face. And this is where I'm able to relax my chin forward and finish that press overhead. Okay? Glutes are squeezed, core is engaged. To do this, I pull that back, pull that chin back, press it overhead. And to come back, I need to rotate those elbows forward, pull that chin back, and come straight down in front of the face, and I can relax the chin forward. Okay? And for a strict press, you're going to end up touching your collarbone or coming close to it on every single rep. What we do not want to see is I don't want the glutes to turn off. My glutes turn off, automatically my back goes into hyperextension. I end up bench pressing this thing. It's getting far away from my midline, and I'm compromising a lot, okay? So keeping the glutes squeezed, the core engaged, keeping those elbows under the bar with a tight grip, I'm able to press that vertically and come back down. That is the strict press or strict shoulder press, okay? So the next part is getting into a push press. A push press is a strict press with the lower body involved. You add a dip and a drive into that. So remember those cues, dip, drive. Whenever I'm getting into this, my feet are in the same position as my strict press, but I'm gonna end up bending at the knee. So you practice this without it first. So I have my feet, toes are straight so that I can engage the glutes really well. I'm gonna put my hands here. So my elbows are coming forward, I'm putting my hands here. I'm gonna practice this dip and drive. So with the dip and drive, you're really just bending at the knee so you can get that elastic energy from the ankle, but also you're using your hips to really extend that body up. If you wanna keep this bar moving in a straight path and you don't want the elbows to dip at all, that means my vertical is going to have to stay, my torso is gonna have to stay vertical, okay? So, I'm going to dip here. This is my dip. It's just a few inches. That's all it takes. My dip and then drive. Dip and drive. So I'm just dipping my knees forward. My hips are not shooting back. They're just staying right underneath me. And I'm using those glutes to really extend up quick. Okay? So you add speed to this as you're coaching this or practicing this. So dip, drive, dip, drive. Dip, drive. Now I add the arms, dip, drive, okay? And as you're doing this, as the weight gets heavier, you're gonna have to add another dip whenever you're receiving that bar down to the shoulders. Because in a push press, you should be able to do more weight than you can do in a strict press. And so as you're dipping and driving it, whenever you come back down, you're gonna want to re-dip to receive that more softly on your shoulders, and then you're ready for your next rep, okay? So as I get into this, the bar path is exactly the same, but the grip will need to be a little bit different, okay? So with the push press, it's difficult to do with the PVC because you don't have any weight helping to hold you down, but your grip is gonna be slightly more forward. You're gonna slightly open up your hands just a bit so they can actually rest on your shoulders. When you're teaching it with a stick, you can lock it in a little bit more underneath the chin so you get a slightly forward posture here. So we're gonna practice a dip. If you want to, as a coach, it can be useful for you to check people's dips, see if they're getting some speed in that. You're just gonna practice with an open hand. Go dip, drive. See if you're getting some vertical drive out of that. Dip, drive. Because that dip and drive are so essential. That's what gets the bar from your shoulders to the top of your head or even higher. Okay, if you're not getting enough force from the legs, from that drive, then it's just a strict press with a little bit of movement from the legs. We want to have a really strong, fast dip and drive so that it's just a finish of the press. And all the momentum going vertical came from the legs and lower body, which is why you're able to do more weight, okay? So once we're able to do that, we're gonna do this dip and drive press. Dip, drive, press. It's a really quick dip and drive. It's not a squat. You don't pause at the bottom. It's a quick, elastic energy that you're just snapping out of the bottom, going straight into that press, okay? So I'm here, elbows are a bit more forward, dip, drive, dip, drive. And it takes a little coordination. Slow it down if you have to in order to practice getting your chin out of the way as you come out. You want to work on driving with the legs before you press with the arms, okay? So that's a push press. Now we're going to get into a push jerk, okay? So push jerk is adding a second dip in order to get underneath the bar quickly, okay? So if you do this correctly, you should be able to do more on the push jerk than you can do on the push press. So you can see how it's a progression. You can strict press a certain amount, and you can push press more than you can strict press, and you can push jerk more than you can push press, okay? The reason for this is you do the same thing that you do in a push press whenever you're doing a push jerk. You do a dip and drive, but whenever you're doing a jerk, you're gonna re-dip underneath that and meet the bar in a partial squat position and then stand up with it. So you're not pressing it as high because you're gonna drop your body slightly into a partial squat. And this is the only press variation where your feet position can potentially change, okay? You're gonna go from a jump position more into a squat position. So you can't necessarily see it in this camera angle because I want to be close on the press, but you're gonna practice this. You're gonna do that dip drive, but then you're gonna come out into a squat stance, which is just going from hip width to shoulder width, okay? So hip width is basically right in line with your body, and then shoulder width comes in line with your shoulders. So you see I just came out a couple of inches on each side there. It's not a huge split because then that can cause some issues with the midline and with the knees crashing in. We want just a few inches out into a shoulder width position whenever we receive this. So you practice it without the stick first. We don't want the distraction of wanting to press it. So I'm just gonna keep my hands here. I'm gonna keep my feet directly underneath me, practicing that dip that's going just vertically down, okay? So dip and then drive. I'm gonna slightly leave the ground and I'm gonna land in a partial squat position, stand up, reset the feet, dip, drive. Okay, so dip, drive, dip. Getting into this second dip, landing in that partial squat. Okay, then you're able to add the arms. So I'm here, elbows are touching, and I'm in much more of a front rack position here. I'm gonna dip, drive, and dip. So dip, drive, and dip. And then stand up, reset the feet, arms back down, okay? That's the pattern that you practice there. Now you have the stick, really lock that in here. Still have a full grip on the bar. If you don't have a full grip, you're not gonna be able to get it into that overhead position safely, okay? So I'm gonna add this dip, drive, and dip, dip, drive, and dip. Okay, you end up over here, stand up, and then reset the feet, and then come back down, okay? You re-dip as you catch it because you're likely able to do more weight. You need to really receive that on the shoulders, okay? So again, nice, strong grip. It's sitting in that front rack. The elbows are a bit forward. You're gonna dip, keep that vertical torso, drive, and dip. And you wanna do this with a lot of speed. Dip, drive, and dip, stand, reset, and down. This is how you drill it with a stick, okay? Now coming to taking it off the rack, okay? When we're taking the bar off the rack, we really want it to be at chest height as much as we can. And I'm gonna show you the difference between the grips here. So with a strict press, it's a vertically stacked position, okay? Because all that force, you want it to be going through the forearm with a straight vertical wrist because you're only getting it from, the power is only coming from the shoulders and the core. In a push press, we want your elbows slightly forward. Imagine they're at about like a 30 to 45 degree angle, okay? Because you're able to rest it on the shoulders. That dip and drive applies the force from the lower body through the shoulder, coming from the torso, which pops the bar off your shoulders. And then as you go up, you're just rotating your hands into that strict press position to finish, okay? That's the push press. In a push jerk, you're putting significantly more force. You don't want to put a ton of force on your hands. And so you're going to have the bar even more slightly forward, not in a full front rack because then you can't really put any force on it to get into that press. So you have a strict press, push press, and then a push jerk, okay? That's the difference in the setup of that front rack position for every single one of these. So let's get into squeeze in behind here, okay? I have it about chest high. I get my finger position, my hand position here. And now I'm gonna face you doing this. You'd normally back up from the rack, okay? So I have my strict press position. That bar is directly stacked with a tight grip, okay? Core is tight, glutes are tight, pull my chin back, press overhead. Pull my chin back, elbows forward, come back down. This is a strict press. okay? Now for a push press, I want it to actually rest on the shoulders, okay? And I'm being gentle here, okay? But you see I had to open up my hand a little bit. If you're struggling to get into this front rack position, you're likely a little bit stiff in the triceps or in the lats, so we need to work on mobilizing this. It's usually not a wrist mobility issue, it's usually more of a lat or tricep mobility issue. So push press, I'm gonna dip and then drive into that strict press overhead and then re-dip to receive it. Dip, drive, dip, drive. Reset, dip, drive. Receive it, dip, drive, okay? And then with a push jerk, I have that more forward position, hands are a bit more open, almost in a front rack, okay, but still have a full grip on the bar. I'm gonna dip, drive, dip, really meet the bar, really pressing that overhead, stand, reset, and back down, okay? That's the progression there, okay? Another thing to note is whenever you're taking it off, you want to be having both feet underneath because you want to take it off in a nice, steady, stacked position, okay? So that's progression, and we're not getting into split jerks right now. But we want to just practice that overhead movement for each of these different types of presses. You have the strict press, the push press, and the push jerk. Now, when would you want to get into a single arm movement? The reason you want to get into a single arm movement is for a few reasons. One could be you notice there's a significant difference. Like, let's say you're a racket player, one shoulder is significantly stronger than the other. So you want to work on correcting that asymmetry as much as you can within a controlled environment. So you're going to do single arm presses while doing that to improve the strength from left to right. Okay. Another reason that you might choose to do a single arm press is because we want to do unilateral work as often as we can because it really builds a ton of core stability. Whenever I'm pressing with one arm, it forces me to stabilize with the core and really learn to engage my glutes and my hips. And so it ends up being a core isometric. I'm holding my core in stability as I'm pressing overhead. So I get the strength benefit in my shoulders and my arms while I'm also getting this core isometric, which is building stability. And it's as if I'm doing an ab exercise while doing a shoulder exercise, okay? And that's the beauty of doing unilateral press work, whether it's doing a flat bench with a single arm or doing a single arm press. I can be doing it standing or seated. Either one is going to force me to engage my core to stabilize. And it really helps with my rotational stability. It really helps with my posture. It really helps me learn that truly good stacked supported position. And so it's a sneaky way of working in some core work while also benefiting with the presses, okay? And then you might start with just progressing with a normal standing press. But another reason that I may want to do unilateral work because it allows me to get into different lower body positions as well that may be a little bit harder to get into if I'm using a barbell. And so I can get into a split stance press, or it can be in a half kneeling press. And that's often what we'll do is whenever someone's struggling with stabilizing their core or working with the pattern, we might put them in a half kneeling position, which is basically the bottom of a lunge. One knee is on the ground. And I'm helping them learn how to really engage the glutes, keep that core stacked, and press it overhead, okay? Or I might get them into this split stance because this is really challenging my stability. I really have to balance now, which is great for any kind of athlete. But at the same time that I'm doing this, the benefit is this, is in our super sedentary world, if you're not being active, you're often sitting. You're in this, hip at 90 degree or less position. So a sneaky way of getting my hip into nice extension is I'm going to be in this split stance, really keeping this glute squeezed and doing my presses, okay? So it's a way of lengthening these tissues, getting an isometric in this hip extension while also working on core stability, strength, and balance and getting the benefit of that press. We want to be able to apply force and power and whatever our position is, to have good, strong core stability. So these are a few reasons why you would choose a unilateral movement. And the more you throw off the balance, the more you make it a challenge with a single arm. You can definitely do double arm too, because especially if you're struggling with this front rack position, you have any kind of wrist issues, you need to keep it stacked. That's another reason you may choose to use a dumbbell movement or kettlebell movement, because you want to keep that wrist super stacked. You don't want to have this front rack challenge on the wrist or anything. So it's a great way to keep the wrist safe while getting the same kind of shoulder work of those overhead presses. And then you can have the unilateral work in order to build up your stability and get that core isometric. Okay, this is our press progression. Hope you learned a lot from this, and you better learn how to coach and program from using this progression and working in the unilateral work.